How's it going, Yankee fans? Welcome back to Fireside Yankees with your boys Alex and Ryan. So the Yankees have been using some of their prospects, and they lost yesterday 6-5. Obviously not ideal, but nonetheless, we really just want to see some of these guys get live at bats and live action. I think that's the most important thing in the team's development for further evaluations. We know what Brian Cashman told us, load of crap. We know that the players are coming to Aaron Boone's defense, which I find admirable because they probably realize that he is in a bad spot right now. All the pressure is kind of like everyone's looking at Cashman, but they're blaming Boone, and I feel like they're going to use him as a scapegoat, and I think the players are trying to defend him and saying, like, we all love him, he's a great coach, he'll do whatever it takes for us, and, like, I respect that. I think they're trying to go out there and publicly try to save his job, which I think is, I don't think firing Boone's not going to change anything, right? I think, Ryan, you'd probably agree with that. Most of you guys would, too. Firing Aaron Boone is, like, the least of our concerns right now. The concerns are about roster construction, which Boone, may or may not have a big hand in, probably not. He is given the roster to coach. I think the only player he really had a hand in was elevating Anthony Volpe. He fought for that publicly. And Volpe's been fine. Like, Volpe's been good over the last couple of months. And I think that he has a lot of upside, and it was fine to see him develop at the major league level. I'd rather see him than IKF start at shortstop. I think most people would agree with that. But, we'll see how the future kind of progresses here. The Yankees will likely call up another prospect. That's what we're going to talk about today. So, Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about catcher Austin Wells, the lefty slugger, and what he might be able to offer this Yankees team if they do call him up in September?
Yeah, so the Yankees are kind of in an interesting situation here, right? Because number one, right, like it's kind of similar to Everson Pereira in the sense that there are questions about whether Everson Pereira is major league ready or not, right? And you're going to see a lot of that development happen at the major league level. And we've kind of seen it, right? Like Patrick Corbin was like, hey, I'm just going to keep throwing you sliders until you show me you can hit it. And he couldn't show him he can hit it yet. So, you're going to see a lot of development happen for these guys at the major league level. And Austin Wells, the thing that really I have the biggest question marks about are his glove, right? The bat has been weird this year. It hasn't been as good as it's been in years past. It's kind of been just like slightly better than average at the AA and AAA level instead of, significantly better than average like he had been in years past. I think part of that's just boredom. Like, I think it was Ronnie Mauricio who there was a report about this, where it's like he's been in AAA for so long that like he's just kind of bored down there, and his numbers have kind of slumped as a result. If you're Austin Wells, your WRC plus in AA at one point was like it was 80 games of like a 130 to 135, and they kept you down there for an extra month and a half. If I'm him, and if you look at the swing trends, it kind of reflects that. He just started swinging more. He was like, I guess I'm just going to go up there and try to swing and try to hit a million home runs and get myself into AAA. And at AAA, he's gotten a little bit better. The numbers as of late have been pretty good. I think he has a 119 WRC plus over the last 2 weeks with better contact rates. He gets sweet spots regularly, which is, if you guys aren't aware, generating launch angles between 8 and 32 degrees. But the biggest question mark is obviously the defense. Like, can he frame? Can Austin Wells frame at a rate that the Yankees are acceptable, putting him behind the dish? Because let's be real here. We can talk about the Yankees' offensive deficiencies. You need to have a strong defensive catcher, especially for managing and navigating, a pitching staff that you hope can get you better results, and one that is going to have an influx of younger guys, right? We've been talking about Drew Thorpe, Richard Fitz yesterday through 6 scoreless innings, Will Warren, Clayton Beater, all these guys. Johnny Brito, Randy Vasquez, we've seen them at the major league level already. The Yankees are trying to include some younger guys in that pitching staff, and part of that is part of their maturation is having a guy behind the dish who they can work with. I know that Kyle Higashioka is someone that people are kind of tired of, but for the most part, the reason that he's in this situation is because our starter got hurt, right? Kyle Higashioka, for all intents and purposes, as a backup catcher, has served as well admirably, right? He's given the Yankees good defense. He's, at least framing-wise, I know that neither Trevino or Higashioka can really hold runners, but I don't think that's a them issue. I think that's an everybody issue. It looks like across the league, the stolen base rates are up, I believe, in terms of success rate, about 5 to 6%, so it's kind of hurt our catchers, and our pitchers are pretty slow to the plate. But, can Austin Wells frame? That's really all that matters. He might give up, 90 stolen bases next year. Who cares, right? Like Francisco Alvarez, when we use the comparison, he's given up 82 steals this year, but he's a really good framer, and he's around the 102 WRC plus, if I'm not mistaken, with 20 home runs. Like, you're going to take that from a catching prospect, especially in year one. If Austin Wells gives you 20 home runs, good framing data, and he's around a 105 WRC plus hitter, that's the Yankees' best catcher since like Gary Sanchez in 2017. And I might say it would be even better because he's a good defender. And you're also getting a left-handed bat. So Austin Wells doesn't have the issues against left-handed pitching that you would anticipate. And the two guys he's going to compete with for the next 2 to 3 years to earn that starting catching job is a guy like Ben Rice and a guy like Augustin Ramirez. Now, Ben Rice can't hit left-handed pitching right now, and he's a little bit more of a question mark defensively. Ramirez is the most sound defender of this group, but he's the farthest away in terms of development. So this is the window for Austin Wells, right? Like, he has the edge over those two guys. He's in AAA. There are a lot of rumors and buzz about calling him up. And I guess I want to pass it off to you like this. We want to see these guys at the major league level, not just because we're like, we want entertainment, but also because we've seen over the course of really as long as I've been a fan of the Yankees, when the Yankees call up guys and they have that first stretch where they struggle, that follow-up season, that next year has typically been a lot better, right? You think of Aaron Judge when he first came up. You think of, even guys like when Aaron Hicks first got here. I know Aaron Hicks didn't work out towards the end, but in 2016, he sucked, right? Didi, when he first got here, couldn't really hit, right? And then over the course of a year or so, they developed, they got playing time, they figured out Yankee Stadium, and they became significantly better hitters. So I guess my question to you would be, when you're looking at what Austin Wells can be for the Yankees at the major league level, are you viewing him as the Jose Trevino replacement? Are you viewing Trevino or Higashioka as the backup? Like, what's your catching situation if Wells is the guy they start going forward?
My catching situation is pretty clear. In my opinion, I think that I would retain Trevino. I think a lot of teams go in the defense first catcher perspective in that strategy. And I would just replace Higashioka. I mean, if that was the direction they wanted to go in. But at the same time, you have to pin him against Ben Rortvedt. I think Ben Rortvedt's about 25 years old and Austin Wells is 24. There's not much of a difference there. So, who's the better offensive piece? Who's the better defensive piece? Teams are going in defensive first catcher kind of routes nowadays. So if Rortvedt is a much better defender than Wells, I think they're just going to prefer to go in that direction and hope that Rortvedt puts together some decent offensive metrics. He has got some power. He has 2 home runs. But then again, Wells has taken some big steps forward, but you don't know unless you try. And I think that's the thing with the Yankees is that they've rolled with players that have no future here, right? Greg Allen never had a future here. Let's be honest. Billy McKinney, we probably doesn't have a future here. IKF is probably gone after this season. Donaldson doesn't have a future here. We have committed to so many players that just don't have futures with the Yankees. But I would like to see us commit to some guys. Ben Rortvedt could have a future with us. The sample size is so small. When you go to Austin Wells, you need guys that can be called up at a moment's notice. If Trevino goes down or Ben Rortvedt goes down, Rortvedt has a serious injury history. If Rortvedt goes down, Austin Wells needs to have experience that can step in and fill that role immediately. You need to give him reps this season because you need to have a backup plan. Kyle Higashioka has 1 year left of arbitration, I believe. The Yankees could bring him back, and they definitely might. He's going to cost more than Trevino or Rortvedt will, that's for sure. If they want to keep some costs down, they can move on from Higashioka. He's been a fine offensive player at the catcher position. Among averages at catcher. Defensively, he's okay. He gets the job done. He has experience with our pitchers, and the coaching staff trusts him, and he's not a locker room, he's a good locker room guy. So, there's benefits to having Higashioka stay, but how much better are they than keeping Rortvedt or Wells? And right now, I want to see, like you said, he has the window right now. Wells has this window now. I want to see what he can do. I want to see that lefty bat in Yankee Stadium. I want to see if he can transition. And like you said, he just might be bored, man. He's 24 years old, and he's been stuck in AAA and AA for so long. I know he just got promoted to AAA, but he's been in AA for over 100 games now. He's played so many minor league games. It's just at a certain point, you're all right, I'm just getting tired of this same old story. I want the challenge. I need to be reinvigorated. I want to get this next opportunity. He's in 262 with a 350 OBP and 458 slugging in AAA over 28 games with 4 homers and 18 RBIs. He's traditionally never had a really high strikeout rate. Averages around 23%, around there. Has 100 WRC plus. He's a fine offensive player in AAA right now, but who's to say he can't maintain that at the next level? Who knows? You got to try. If you don't try, you'll never find out. And I think that's where the Yankees are starting to come to full circle. If you don't test Everson Pereira, you're never going to find out. If you don't give Peraza more at-bats, you're never going to find out. Jason Dominguez is kicking ass in AAA over 3 games. Tiny sample size, but just wanted to throw that in there. Really strong start for the kid. So there's a lot of players here who the Yankees can leverage and start to give opportunities because we don't have a reason to compete for a postseason appearance. Now's the chance to start developing data points and adding up all of these at-bats and seeing what they can do for the future, seeing where can we tweak this, where can we change that. Pereira had his first hit yesterday, a double to left field, roped it. Really good sign for him. Getting that first hit out of the way is oftentimes like the kind of game changer for a lot of players. You get that one out of the way, now you feel a little bit more comfortable the next at bat and keep going. He has struck out a significant amount over the past 2 games, but that's only expected. We expected this to happen. But right now I just feel like what's the downside of playing your prospects? What's the downside of calling up, Austin Wells and having him play over Higashioka? We have a really heavily right-handed hitting lineup anyway. I'd like to see more from Rortvedt because he's probably going to be here next year and he has a lot of minor league options. But what would you say about seeing Rortvedt and Wells finish the rest of the season and then Higashioka just kind of, Rortvedt's been catching Garrett Cole. So, that's really all that matters is, what Garrett Cole wants in that instance. But what do you think about that? Just kind of, benching Higashioka and just seeing what you have in Wells and Rortvedt and seeing what those lefty bats can do in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, so that's kind of the interesting thing, right? What are the Yankees going to do in terms of if they send somebody down, right? Because I know the rosters do expand, so they could just go with 3 catchers. But I feel like that's kind of counterproductive, right? You'd want Austin Wells in the lineup as much as possible, and you don't have, Austin Wells hasn't played other positions. And, if they call him up on September 1st, it's August 25th right now. He's got a week to play, first base and left field, right? So, and left field's occupied now. So now you have Pereira out there, so you can't even just say, hey, go play left field, because that's a position that's occupied. You could say, hey, go play first base, but don't you want Austin Wells catching as a full-time catcher, getting full-time reps, working, yes, with guys like Garrett Cole so he can get better? I feel like that feels like the objective, right? That feels like what you want him to do. But it's a weird situation because catchers affect your pitchers. So you don't want to hurt your pitchers, but you also want Austin Wells to get work. It's a weird situation. Now, for Rortvedt, I kind of feel bad for him because I think he's getting option if they call up Wells or his playing time gets severely cut into. It's just hard for him, right? The playing time and the guys they have right behind him are all higher upside players and healthier players. Rortvedt, if you look at Ramirez, Rice, and Wells, he's probably the best defensive player there. I don't know if he's that much better than Ramirez defensively, but he's probably better defensively than Wells and Rice. I'll say definitely. But offensively, he's clearly got the worst tools of the 4 by a significant margin, and he has the worst injury track record of the 4 by, again, a significant margin, right? So it's a weird situation to be in, and if you're the Yankees, you want Austin Wells to be with a guy who's also a right-handed catcher, because then that platoon makes sense. That's why I really like, as you mentioned, Jose Trevino, I think that's the perfect backup for Austin Wells, because you can also learn from him. And also Trevino kills left-handed pitching. I think he's a career 96 WRC plus hitter, but with the Yankees, he's at a 130, 140. And if you get I'm not going to say 140, if you get a 95 WRC plus Jose Trevino, even if it's in a reduced sample size and only playing in a backup role, that's a really good backup catcher to have. That's the type of backup catcher the Yankees have kind of missed having, and what they expected Higashioka to be. And in some senses, Higashioka has come close to that, but he's never been able to be reduced to a full-time platoon because he never really had a full-time starting catcher that they can trust behind the plate and in the lineup, because Gary Sanchez wasn't that towards the end. And Trevino's never really been the reliable bat that you hoped he could be. So, or not hoped he could be, but you never really hoped he could hit. But ultimately, Austin Wells presents the Yankees with the first complete catcher they've had in a while, and that depends on his framing, but you need to get him the playing time to do so. So the way I look at it is Austin Wells, I think he's the starter. I think you get Rortvedt back in AAA. They also are going to need a catcher. If you look at what the Scranton Rail Riders are going to need at that point, they will need another catcher. I guess you could hypothetically promote Ben Rice to follow up Austin Wells. But even that, is that real? Are they comfortable making Ben Rice a full-time catcher? I'm not sure. I would love to see it. But again, not sure. The question really remains, you're going to have Higashioka, Trevino, and Rortvedt under contract next year. It's going to be very interesting to see what the Yankees do at the catching position. Very interesting to see, 2 of these 3 guys can't be here next year, or they can't be at the major league level. And Rortvedt having options could prevent him from getting traded, but I'm not sure he has options after next year. So that'll definitely be interesting. Ultimately, as you mentioned, you also would like to have more left-handed hitting. I don't think the Yankees need to get left-handed hitters just to get left-handed hitters, but if you have a good left-handed hitter over a good right-handed hitter, that's probably a good trade for the Yankees. And there's not like they have good right-handed hitting at the catching position anyway, so there's that. And I guess the last point I want to make before I pass it off to you is Austin Wells is part of the future. I think Austin Wells, in some capacity is going to impact this team. And he's 24 years old. He's a college pick, so you expect him to kind of have less of a learning curve at the major league level. Everything he learns defensively from here on forward at the major league level is going to be so important to what he does long term. If he ever becomes an above average framing catcher and he is ever just half the offensive player he was at the minor league level, this is a guy who hits 20 home runs for you, bats in the 6th or 7th spot, breaks up some of the righties in the middle of your lineup. And the upside here, hits 25 home runs, 120, 125 WRC plus bat, hits third in your lineup, and suddenly you've got one of the big boppers, and you check off a box on the left-handed side. That's less money you have to spend in the offseason. So there's a lot of upside here, and I think the Yankees are going to ultimately make the call.
I mean, they need to, because when you look at it realistically, like having a lefty slugger and above average offensive catcher is a luxury, especially if they can hold their own defensively. So I'm really excited to see what Austin Wells can do. I'm really excited to see what these young guys can do at the MLB level. And we're starting to creep into Everson Pereira and Peraza, and they benched IKF for Peraza, who's going to be getting everyday opportunities. And now's the time. They have about a month here, a little bit more, to really showcase what they can do and prepare for 2024 and make a case to be starting next season. So there's a lot of opportunity here to have. Hopefully the Yankees will give them a long leash and not change course in the middle of this. It's time to commit to this. It's time to give them the opportunity, and I think they are going to. So, guys, I'd love to hear your perspectives below on Austin Wells, what you think the Yankees should do. Always happy to hear your perspectives. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.